Republicans, we're all Federalists, we're all going to come together and we're going to do this, but the next 24 years there's going to be Democratic Republicans as president, right? And the Federalists kind of just like die out. Watch a presidential speech today, the day they get elected, that's the first thing they'll do. They'll practice their inner Jefferson. Oh, we all have to come together, we're all Democrats, we're all Republicans, they all do it. It's called presidential virtue. It's that idea of reaching out to the other side when you become elected. And we know that this election was very, very tight and very contested. So, highlights of Jefferson's presidency. You got to mention the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, from France and Napoleon, $15 million total, 3 cents per acre. Most acres around here would cost you thousands of dollars, right? So pretty smart decision by Jefferson. Originally, we went to France just trying to get the port of New Orleans for trading up the Mississippi River, and they said, hey, we need money to fight this war against Britain. How about we sell you the whole dang thing? So, largest land acquisition in the history of the United States. Nice call by Jefferson, but against his beliefs. Where in the Constitution does it say a president can purchase land by himself, right, with no approval of anybody? So that's kind of the yin and yang of Jefferson, right? Did he live up to all the things that he said he was about? The Barbary Wars with the pirates off the coast of Libya. Arr. So he's trying to establish like an international presence around the world. And even though we don't really have a navy, Jefferson's trying desperately to do that. Sort of a failure there. Went against his beliefs morally and politically with the Louisiana Purchase. The real failure of Jefferson, as great as the Louisiana Purchase was probably navigating neutrality in this war between Britain and France. So there's a few different things he tries. The big failure was in 1807 when he says Embargo Act. We're not trading with anybody. No more trading. Well, that's going to kill American business, right? The Federalists are like, you're an idiot for doing this, 1807. And then he changes it to the Non-Intercourse Act, haha. And it says, we'll trade with anybody but Britain and France. But we're just not going to do business with you guys. And then finally they settle on Macon's Bill number 2, which says we'll trade with the country that doesn't mess with us. Well, ultimately, Jefferson sides with France, right? Because he had always been pro-French and he had negotiated in France for a long time. But still, he feels like he's sort of been duped by Napoleon throughout this entire thing. And really, navigating this war between the two sets the stage for the War of 1812, or the Second War for American Independence. So in 1808, little James Madison takes over as president. He was Jefferson's vice president, another guy from Virginia, another Democratic Republican, and Madison's really known for the War of 1812. So here's what sets up the war. Britain was practicing a policy called impressment. Has nothing to do with like impressing somebody. But that's where you take our sailors off our ship and you force them to serve in the British Navy, impressment. So like stealing people and then asking them to serve in the Navy or the Army, right? When we went into the frontier and got into a lot of these Indian areas, we found guns that had British logos on them. And as it turned out, we heard stories about how the British were telling the Native Americans to fight back against, the newly formed country, and they gave them the weapons to do so, right? That really rubbed us the wrong way. After the war, Britain said they were going to leave completely the Northwest Territory, which again was that frontier area. Still British forts, they're still hanging around. They told us they would get out, but they hadn't. So they still had a presence in the New World. Also something that sort of, pissed us off. So, we declare war again. The war is a tie at best. They burned the White House down in Washington, D.C. We had to build it up again. A very famous battle at the Battle of Baltimore, which Francis Scott Key wrote the Star-Spangled Banner. At the end of the war in 1815, this frontier hillbilly Andrew Jackson is sent in as general to kick the British redcoats' asses at New Orleans. 2,000 redcoats die. 70 Americans die in the battle. And America gets this false sense of like, yeah, we won the war, because immediately after that battle, a peace treaty came over from Britain that said, we're done, let's remain neutral, let's end this war. But the truth was the war was really a stalemate, and the peace treaty was already negotiated before the Battle of New Orleans. The Battle of New Orleans never should have happened. The war was over, but it took so long to get that over by boat from Britain to the United States. America wins this battle that never should have happened, and there's this false sense of security that we won the war. No territory changed hands. Britain kind of stopped messing with us, but there really wasn't much to it. But out of that comes the Star-Spangled Banner, the Second War for Independence. We just got pushed down on the playground and we stood up to the bully in middle school, right? I mean, it's that sense of like, we did this again. We call that patriotism, nationalism, right? And that leads us beautifully into the era of good feelings. That's Monroe's presidency, right? Monroe, another Virginia president, another Democratic Republican, slave-holding president from Virginia, just like Jefferson, just like Madison. So Virginia sort of becomes the center of power that's producing president after president in this 24-year run. So Washington was neutral. Adams was a Federalist, Jefferson, Madison, Monroe, Democratic Republicans. If you remember during the War of 1812, there was something called the Hartford Convention in 1814 that was, they love this question, the death of the Federalist Party. A lot of the Federalists did not want to go to war, and they threatened to secede from the Union. And any talk of secession in 1814, you were just going to be seen as a rebel or whatever. And so a lot of people just thought the Federalists were crazy. We're not going to fight this war and stand up to Britain. So in 1824, everything is shifting. Everything is changing. People are moving out west. Population is growing in Kentucky, Tennessee, what would be the wild, wild west back then, right? The frontier. In 1824, because of something called the corrupt bargain, Henry Clay, very famous senator and voice from Kentucky, swings the votes in the Senate away from Andrew Jackson to John Quincy Adams because Henry Clay hates Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson cries foul because Jackson won the popular vote. More people voted for Jackson than for John Quincy Adams, but son of John Adams, John Quincy Adams, a Democratic Republican, wins the vote because of this corrupt bargain when Clay convinces all these senators to break the tie and vote for him. John Quincy Adams has some good ideas. He wanted to build a national observatory, a national university like America University, a college where everybody could go. A lot of internal improvements to roads, canals. Think the Erie Canal was dug during that time period. But his Congress and him never really got along, and so John Quincy Adams was merely just a placeholder for what will become America's true hero, Andrew Jackson in 1828, right? The man of the people, the guy who invites commoners to the White House for his inauguration and gets drunk and dirties up the carpet and breaks a bunch of stuff and thousands of dollars worth of damage, who walks from his house to the steps of the Capitol to give his speech, right? An orphan during the war, saw his brother die, hated Britain, an intense passion and against Britain. So kind of a gritty guy, couldn't spell his own name, a drunk, somehow made it through law school, but Americans identified with him, right? He was a man of the people. So the question with Jackson also is, did he live up to that image? So Jackson, a test of the federal versus state power is the tariff issue. The tariff skyrockets under Jackson. Calhoun from South Carolina says that we're going to secede from the Union. We're not going to pay this high tariff. We need machinery from Britain that we can't get, and we have to pay a lot to go get it. And so South Carolina, southern states don't like this high tariff. Ultimately, Jackson says, if you secede from the Union, I'll go down there and hang every single one of you myself. You're not seceding. Jackson backs down, lowers the tariff a little bit, but squashes that. Again, South Carolina leading the charge here in playing like the bad boy, right? We're not going to follow you. It's coming again in slavery. Once in power, stay with me a couple more minutes. Jackson says he's a champion of states' rights, but he squashes the bank. He moves the Cherokee Indians from Georgia to Oklahoma, right, on executive decision. He ignores the power of the Supreme Court, which we had just said in 1803, Marbury versus Madison Judicial Review, was the supreme law of the land. Jackson, blatantly goes against it. He issues something in 1837 called the Specie Circular, throws the country into a panic, devalues currency as a new form of money that Jackson had issued through the bank. Ultimately, his boy Martin Van Buren will take the fall for it because the country is depressed when he becomes elected. Martin Van Buren, he was also a Jacksonian Democrat. In 1840, you've got a new party, the Whigs, W-H-I-G-S. The Log Cabin Hard Cider Campaign. William Henry Harrison, I killed Tecumseh the Prophet. I'm the true American, right? I can drink more whiskey than you can. Well, apparently he did too much of that because he died 6 weeks after pneumonia. Tyler takes over, doesn't like the whole Whig thing, goes back to being a Democrat or Republican. Polk takes over. Polk is the young Hickory, right? Old Hickory was Andrew Jackson. The young Hickory, all about expansion. So the Mexican-American War in 1848, when we acquire 8 new states, Texas, Oregon, and then through the Mexican-American War, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, throws that slavery question wide open. Is it going to be slavery or is it going to be free? In 1820, we had a patchwork, a Band-Aid compromise called the Missouri Compromise of 1820. Missouri enters as a slave state, Maine enters as a free state, and we have balance. And in 1850, we try to hold off on this once more with the Compromise of 1850, where Missouri would come in and we'd allow popular sovereignty. But really, the Compromise of 1850 is going to set the stage for the larger decade of crisis, which will lead us right up to the Civil War, right? If we didn't acquire all that land and we didn't have any idea whether to make it slave or free, we probably wouldn't have gotten to this stage in fighting the Civil War. So next week, 1850, the decade of crisis, the Civil War and Reconstruction. Okay, so 1850 to 1877. All right, guys.